right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. We're really excited this week because this is our World Oceans Week Spectacular. We are doing over 50 hangouts with marine researchers, educators, explorers from across the globe. We're about halfway through that right now. And so for the classes that have joined us, thanks for being here so far. For the class that are joining us for our first time ever even, it's great to have you. Right now, we've got 4 classes from across North America. So I'll give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out, and then we'll introduce our speaker. So first, we've got Miss Overstreet, grade 6/8 from Spanaway in Washington. Hi, guys.
Say hi.
Hi. Hi. We've got Miss Barajas and Miss Martinez as grade 6s in Oxnard, California, who are invisible, but they are coming. The classes are coming soon. We've got Miss Rowan's grade 8s in Bowmanville, Ontario. Hi, guys. And we've got Miss Brown's grade 11s in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, much lower pitch than everyone. I love it. Okay. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. So we are joined live by Dr. Diva Amon in Trinidad and Tobago, who is a deep sea researcher. The deep sea is the most unexplored region of our globe. We know more about Mars and the surface of the moon than we do about the deep ocean. And so Diva wants to remedy that by learning as much as she can about it and serving as a tireless ambassador and educator, spreading the word of how amazing the deep sea is. And so without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Diva.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you for having me. As Jesse said, my name is Diva and I'm a deep sea biologist. And before I get started on my presentation, I wanted to ask all of you what you know about the deep sea. I want you to tell me, what are the main characteristics of the deep ocean?
Okay, so we'll start with Miss Rowan's class. If you guys, what do you think about the deep ocean? What jumps to mind?
Pretty cool. It's deep.
It is deep.
Has water in it. Yeah, there's a lot of unexplored parts of it, like at the bottom of the sea and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Okay, unexplored, dark, cool. Anything else?
Lots of creature.
Yep. Okay. We'll check with Miss Brown's class. Anything you guys think?
There's a high pressure down there.
Yes.
High pressure. Okay, Miss Overstreet's class.
Sunken ships.
That is true. There are lots of those.
Okay, and Miss Braw's class is still coming in, so there you go. Whole bunch of answers.
So that's actually great. You guys are super on top of it already. It is dark. There is no sunlight in the deep sea, pitch black. It's also really cold, about 2 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. Jesse, do you know? But it's almost freezing. Almost freezing. And there are really, really high pressures. So for every 10 meters you descend in the ocean, you gain 1 atmosphere of pressure equal to what we are feeling right now. So if you were to go down 3,000 meters, it would be 300 times the pressure we're feeling right now. And to show you what kind of impact that has, we do this funny thing where we send down cups, styrofoam cups at that, deep into the ocean on the bits of instruments that we use. And because of the high pressures, styrofoam, of course, has air in it. And so the pressures compress the styrofoam on the way down and squeeze all of the air out of the cup. And when the cup comes back, it's this size. So this would have started off just like this. So that's just to show you how strong the pressure is, okay? So with that, since you guys are already on top of it, I'm just gonna get going on my presentation. So hold on. Okay. So, can you see?
Yep,
yeah?
great.
Great. Okay, so as I said, I am from Trinidad and Tobago, which is here in the Caribbean, but I'm currently living in London doing research at the Natural. Hold on, let me hide this. Oh, did that? Hold on, wait. Can you see a little thing at the bottom of my screen?
No, we see that you're
right.
Good. When you're like that, it's good. We just see your screen entirely.
Okay, great. Perfect. Sorry. Right. So, as I said, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean, but I currently live in London because I'm doing research there at the Natural History Museum. But I ended up being a marine biologist because, and this is going to sound really cheesy, growing up on an island surrounded by water meant that I spent a lot of time at the beach. And I read everything I could about the ocean and the environment and all of the animals that lived in the ocean. But as I got older, I realized that there were lots of questions that I couldn't answer about the oceans. And so I decided that I wanted to study marine biology when I went to university. And just a few years later, I am now a deep sea biologist who gets to travel all around the world exploring the deep ocean. And let me tell you, I think it's the best job in the world. So my research tends to focus on trying to answer two questions. The first, what lives in our world's deep oceans? And I tend to look at the really big animals, so animals you can see in pictures or in video. And the second question I try to answer is, how are we humans impacting our deep oceans? You may not realize it, but we are already in a big way. So there are very few careers that really allow you to be amongst the first people on the planet to see a new species or a new habitat or something that we had no idea up until that moment previously existed. And that's really, really, really special. As a deep sea scientist, you're basically a real life explorer. So if I haven't sold it to you, you may as well leave. So to do my research, I spend between 1 and 3 months a year on a ship, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later, and I get to use some really cool tools. But what exactly is the deep ocean? As you guys just told me, it's dark, it's cold, it's really high pressures, and it's also really food limited. There's not a lot of food in the deep sea. But the deep ocean basically is everything below 200 meters depth. And the deepest point on our planet is about 11,000 meters in the Marianas Trench at a place called Challenger Deep. So actually, all of the blue on this map, dark blue on this map at that, is what we consider to be deep ocean. And so you can see it's the majority of the map. It's actually about 60% of the Earth's surface and 96% of all habitable space on our planet. And so that makes it by far the largest ecosystem on Earth. But it's crazy because most of the deep sea is really unexplored, as Jesse said in the beginning of this presentation. In fact, over 99% of it has never been explored, as in no one has ever seen what is down there. We have better maps of the moon, of Mars, of Venus than we do our own deep sea planet. Isn't that absolutely crazy? So, to tell you a little bit more about the deep sea, this is a photo of the deep ocean floor at about 4 kilometers depth, which is about 2.5 miles down in the northern Atlantic. And this is a part of the deep sea called the abyssal plain. And it's actually what constitutes most of the deep sea floor. Most of it looks like this. It's very flat. It's sedimented. You can't really see that much life. You know, there's a little sea urchin, which is the little triangle thing you can see. There's some worms. You can see the tubes in the background. But again, there's just not a lot going on there. And that's because it's a really difficult place to live, the deep ocean. But just like on land, there are a variety of habitats. There are mountains under the sea called seamounts. And these usually have the most luxurious coral and sponge gardens. Yeah, there's also coral in the deep sea. It is related to the corals you get at coral reefs that you snorkel on, but these corals are quite different and just incredible looking. What else? So these were spotted on an expedition I went on in the Marianas Trench in 2016. And not only are there seamounts, but there are also hydrothermal vents in the deep ocean. And so those are these really unique sort of volcanoes where chemical-rich fluid seeps out of the seafloor or gushes out of the seafloor in this very thick white or black liquid, which almost looks like smoke. So in the top two photos, you can see some of the white smoke around the two structures. And in the top right one, you can see the black smoky type liquid going off into the distance. And so these habitats were actually totally unknown until 1977. And they're amazing because they have this huge amount of life living on these sort of chimney-like structures. And that's because this fluid, which is gushing out of the seafloor, has lots and lots of chemicals in it. And those chemicals are then used by animals and bacteria to create food. So of course, on land, we have photosynthesis, which is where plants use energy from the sun, light from the sun, to make food. But in the deep sea, of course, there is no sunlight. And in a handful of environments, like hydrothermal vents, you get animals using chemical energy from this fluid seeping out of the seafloor. And it's, again, a type of life that we had no idea existed until the 1970s. So not only do we have abyssal plains and seamounts with corals and hydrothermal vents, and also things like trenches, canyons, we also have food falls. And so those are really interesting because, as I said, the deep sea lacks a lot of food. And so what tends to happen to a whale when it dies, sometimes it will wash up onto shore. And that only happens about 10% of the time. The rest of the time, the whale will die and sink into the deep sea. And so there, it will then prompt this feeding bonanza. And it's not only dead whales, it'll be dead fish, dead turtles, dead anything big, that sinks down into the deep sea floor, and even dead trees that can wash out of rivers, pieces of wood and so on, sinks down to the seafloor and becomes like a Thanksgiving Day feast for animals. You get animals coming from near and far to feed on this huge amount of food, which has just arrived on the deep sea floor. And so it means that we find a lot of animals congregating in one area, which is pretty rare for the deep sea. And then, of course, there are things, as I said, like canyons, trenches, brine pools, cold seeps. Just like on land, there are a variety of habitats down in the deep sea. So how do we do our work down there? Obviously, it's really high pressure, it's really cold. We can't hold our breaths, humans. So how do we, get down there? So we tend to use, or I tend to use at least, two types of equipment to get the images, the videos and the pictures of the animals that I'll be studying, and also the samples of the animals I'll be studying. So the first one, and my favorite type, is called a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. And so you can see one here in the photo, and basically that's about the size of a car, a small car, but nobody goes in it, no humans go in it. It's attached to the ship by a tether, so a cord, which gives it power and also allows the video from the cameras, which you can see on the front here. This is a camera, this is a camera, these are cameras. It has quite a lot of cameras on it. So all of those cameras will capture video live from the deep sea floor, and it'll be sent up this cord, this umbilical cord, to the ship where scientists can watch live. Also, it's got these manipulator arms. So you can see one here and you can see one here. And those are basically our hands on the deep sea floor, and it allows us to collect samples of nearly every kind, something from a really tiny, fragile coral to a really squishy sea cucumber. And then also we've got this tray on the front where we can put our samples. These are to put rocks, these boxes here. And then just behind, we've got some sealed containers where we can put animals to prevent them from escaping, but also to prevent them from experiencing the change in temperature and pressure. Well, no, they will experience pressure, but the change in temperature as they go from the deep sea to the sea surface when we're bringing the ROV back onto deck. So this is really sort of our workhorse as deep sea biologists. We use it for our eyes, our ears, and our hands on the deep sea floor. And the other main type of piece of equipment that I use is submersibles. And so these we get to use a lot more rarely. And that's because they're not as efficient as ROVs. So these are, unlike the ROV, they are not tethered to the ship. They are not connected to the ship by any cord. They're just free living, like a car almost, that can drive around in the deep sea. And actually you put people in it. So this particular one can hold 3 people, 1 driver and 2 scientists. And it allows us scientists, as well as, media people and so on, to go down themselves into the deep sea. And the experience is just Really incredible. And of course, to do all of this work, we need a ship. The deep sea is usually located quite far from land. Sometimes we're out in the literal middle of the ocean. And so we need a ship. And so these ships can tend to hold about 50 to 60 people. It'll have everything from chefs to captains that drive the ship, to deckhands who help launch the equipment, to scientists, to engineers who keep the boat running, to pilots who drive the submersibles and the ROVs. But it basically is our home while we're at sea. And we tend to go to sea for about a month at a time, more or less, because usually, as I said, we're quite far away from land. And these ships will actually work normally 24 hours a day. And that's because these ships are so expensive to run that we want to make the most of being out there. So it means we'll always have people up and working. So we tend to work in shifts, which can be really tiring, but is still really, really fun. So why should we study the deep sea? Why is it important? As both Jesse and I said, the deep sea is the largest ecosystem on our planet. It is responsible for functions that keep us humans alive. It cycles nutrients. It removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It detoxifies our oceans. And now, more and more, we're beginning to use the deep sea. And so we currently use it to get food, fisheries. We also use it to get oil and gas, which we use to, power our cars, create electricity. It's also becoming a source of metals. And so we're running out of metals on land, and also mines on land sort of being exhausted. And so now we're actually in the future, we'll start to get them from the deep ocean. Amazingly, the deep sea also provides medicine. There are a number of basically animals where scientists have gotten compounds from them, and they're now being trialed for different cures for different diseases. So I know one of the most effective cures against breast cancer, treatments for breast cancer, is actually from a sponge. It's a sponge from the shallow waters, but there are similar opportunities for us to get this kind of medicine from the deep ocean also. And of course, it provides us with new technology. We are developing technology to explore our oceans, but also there are instances where, at the whale falls we were just talking about, the food falls, because the bacteria that digest the fats found in the bones, the whale bones, actually work most effectively at the cold temperatures down in the deep sea. Those have now been taken back to the lab and have actually been introduced into our washing powders that we put in our washing machines. And that allows people now to wash their clothes more effectively at lower temperatures, so that we can, begin to use less energy and hopefully fight climate change and reduce our carbon emissions, which is pretty cool. So who knows what else is out there still to find? We haven't explored, 99% of our deep oceans. So who knows what else is left to find? And so, as I said, part of my work is understanding how we are impacting our deep oceans. Of course, using it to get food, to get oil and gas and so on means that, of course, we're going to be affecting it in a certain way. And so the picture on the lower right is actually, I was on the Oceanus Explorer, which is one of the NOAA ships that streams all of their deep sea videos live. And I encourage you all to check that out after. But we were there in the Gulf of Mexico in December, and we were going to explore what we thought was a shipwreck. We just had a scan of the seafloor, which had been done by a ship a while ago. And so we could just see that there was a little sort of blip, like that. We knew there was something there, but we didn't know what it was. And so we sent down our ROV to investigate it, expecting to find this deep sea shipwreck. And there is actually a video of this on the NOAA Oceanus Explorer website. But instead, we actually found a shipping container. And this shipping container had been ripped open. And what we thought was the debris field around a shipwreck was actually a bunch of fridges, washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, scattered all around the floor that had fallen out of this container. So it's just an example of like how much our how much we're affecting the oceans. Our litter is ending up in the deep sea. On every single expedition I've been on, which is about 15, we found trash. Be it a plastic bag, a Coca-Cola can, you name it, we found it. Toilets, everything. And that's from the Marianas Trench all the way down to Antarctica. I've never been on an expedition where I haven't seen trash, which is quite sad. And we need to remember that our planet cannot be healthy without a healthy ocean. And the ecosystem, which comprises most of the ocean, is the deep ocean. And so we need a healthy deep ocean to ensure that we remain healthy. So just to wrap up, the deep sea is filled with all of these interesting habitats. And because it's such a weird place to live, it results in really weird animals. And this is the best part as far as I think. So we've got everything from, like moving from the top, sea slugs, to jellies, to crabs, to sea cucumbers, sponges, snails, you name it. If there is a shallow water relative example, there's probably a deep sea example, as long as it doesn't breathe air. But unlike the shallow water examples, everything in the deep sea looks pretty weird. So I'm going to wrap up by telling you what my 4 favorite deep sea animals are. So number 4, counting down. Oh, hold on. Let's see if this will work. So this is a relative of a jelly. It's not actually a jellyfish, despite what that says. It's called a hydromedusa. And this was discovered during an expedition to explore the Mariana Trench in 2016 that I was on. And we were on board using the ROV Deep Discoverer on the Okeanos Explorer. And this was found at over 2 miles depth, about 4 kilometers depth. And it's closely related to the Portuguese man-o-war, which is another type of, not jellyfish, but relative of the jellyfish. And so this species is new. And at the beginning of the video, you saw that it was quite it had its tentacles extended. And let me see if I can replay it. Okay, or not. So it had its tentacles extended, and it was very motionless with its tentacles out. And so we think that we actually spotted it in predation mode. So it was hanging in the air with its tentacles exposed. And if something were to touch its tentacles, or it were to feel the vibrations of an animal close by, it would quickly snap them up with the tentacles. That's what we think anyway. So really interesting find, and a new species, which is always great. So this is Casper the octopus. It was given the nickname Casper because it's white and it's pretty cute, let's be honest. So this little octopus was found off Hawaii in 2016, again by the Okeanos Explorer. And this one was found at 3 miles depth, so about 4.5 kilometers. And again, a completely new species of octopus. And this was a really interesting find because the octopus in the deep sea, in the really deep sea, usually they're called Dumbo octopuses, and they have fins on the side of their head that look like Dumbo ears almost. That's why they've been given that nickname, Dumbo octopus. But as you can see, this one does not have the fins on the side of its head. And so this was actually not only a new species, but it was the deepest record ever for this type of octopus that doesn't have the fins on the side of its head. And then my second favorite animal in the deep ocean is the Yeti crab. Some of you may have heard of this one. So it's a blind white crab, which lives at the hydrothermal vents, like we talked about earlier, found in the Antarctic, so in the Southern Ocean. And they are found there in the millions, as you can see from this photo. And they're literally just all piled onto each other on the chimneys, gushing out this fluid. And the reason they're found around these fluids is because, as you can see from the picture in the top right, they've got a really, really hairy chest and hairy arms. And so what they do is they put their hairs, the hairs on the chest and the hairs on their arms, into this warm, chemical-rich fluid. And that chemical-rich fluid is then used by really special bacteria that live on the hairs. And those bacteria create energy and are able to multiply. And so when the crab gets hungry, it'll then just scoop some of the bacteria off of its hairs and eat the bacteria. So it's pretty much like this crab has a grocery living on its chest and arms, which, again, crazy. The deep sea, just full of weird and wonderful things. And so my last slide before we go on is my number one animal. I just think it's really cute. I don't really know why, but this is called a long-nosed chimera. And I mean, everybody loves sharks, right? They're just great, sharks and rays. And so this is the deep sea relative of a shark and a ray. And it's called a chimera. It's also called a rabbitfish or a ratfish or a spookfish. And they're just so weird. Look at it. And so this one has the characteristic long nose, and they move really, really slowly, and they're just amazing. And so we spotted this one in the Gulf of Mexico last December when we were on the Oceanos Explorer. And it was my first time seeing the species, and I just really, really loved it. It was really great. And so this one is actually a male. You can see because of the two fins coming off, you can only see one, but the fin coming off the bottom of the body. And we just know very little about them. And we know very little about all the animals living in the deep ocean. So with that, thank you for having me. And thank you for exploring by the seat of your pants for organizing this. And I'm happy to take questions. Hold on, let me put back on the screen if I can manage that.
I bet you can. Please.
There we go. Is that it? Yay!
But that was great. I'm so glad you got Yeti crab in, and that you describe things not like a scientist, but like a 5-year-old who seems so
because I am secretly a 5-year-old.
Awesome. All right, so let's start with Miss Overstreet's class. If you guys have a question, come on up.
Do you have a question? Do you have a question? What's your question? Ask your question.
Yeah. One of those inscrutable questions. It's hard to come up with. We can always come back if you're still thinking.
Can you come back to us?
Yeah, no problem. That's okay. All right, we'll go to Miss Barajas and Miss Martinez's large group. If you guys have a question, come on up.
Wait, really? I have a question. Okay, my question is, for the Yeti crab, why does it only eat its hair instead of other species or other fish?
I mean, I think scientists are still trying to find this out. We're still trying to work this out. It doesn't actually eat the hair, though. It eats the bacteria, which it grows on the hair. So it's like eating, if you had a corn plant in your garden, you're eating the corn only and not the plant of the corn itself. Does that make sense? So we don't know, but I don't know. If you had a grocery on your chest, wouldn't you just never go to the grocery? You'd just keep eating what you had on your chest, right? It's easier, maybe.
Thank you for that image, Diva. That's one we've never had in it. Awesome. All right. Let's go to Miss Rowan's class. If you guys have a question.
Yeah. Okay, we're coming.
Yeah, take your time.
Go ahead and ask your question. Why do the chinchilla, what's the long nose thing with
Chimera.
why are they why can you see through them partially? When you look at the photo, you could kind of see inside. It's kind of creepy, but why is that?
So that might just be a trick of the light. The chimeras you usually can't see inside of, but their eyes do look a bit weird. But there are lots of deep sea animals that you can see through. And a reason for that is because a lot of animals don't have patterns. They don't have very, ornate displays or anything. And that's because in the deep ocean, as we said before, there's no light. And so nothing can really see each other. And so why have colors? Why have patterns? Why have a skin that's so strong that you can't, see through it if nothing can see you?
Yes. All right, we'll go to Miss Brown's group.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get up so they can see. Okay, come on.
What was like the most like the scariest experience you had like being underwater?
I didn't quite catch
Yeah,
that.
come a little closer to the camera. Sorry.
What's the most scariest experience you've had being underwater?
Ooh.
That's a good question. So probably my first time in a submersible. We went down to about 1.5 miles depth, 2 hydrothermal vents, and they actually, first of all, it was pretty scary because I mean you're in a space which is probably like 4 feet across, 3 feet across, and you're in there with 2 other people. So I was in there with 2 Japanese men because it was a Japanese submersible. They couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak Japanese. It was interesting. And so we went down. Of course, you're scared because you're like, well, if something goes wrong, nobody can help us. But, you know, you kind of forget about it after a little while because you get so busy when you get down there. You have a list of things to do, as well as there are so many amazing things to see. But the submersible pilot drove the submersible on top of the hydrothermal vent. And the hydrothermal vent is gushing out like superheated fluid. Like sometimes it can be 300 degrees Celsius. I think the ones we were over were about 100 degrees Celsius, so boiling temperature. And he put us right over the vent, and you could sort of hear the creaking of the submersible when we were in it. And I was just like, nope, not into what's happening right now. And the other interesting thing about being in a submersible there are no toilets. So you're in there for about 9 hours, and there's no toilet. I will leave the rest up to you to figure out or think about what happens.
This is like a sharing crew. We've got chefs, submersibles. So out of curiosity, so you can't tell the driver to like move off as he doesn't speak English. Like, did they get off eventually?
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. And I'm sure I was just more worried than I should have been. I mean, they absolutely know what they're doing, right? This is what they do for their entire job. And they train like crazy to do this. But I think it was because it was my first time, I was just a little unsettled. But I'm sure it was, in reality, safe. As safe as can be, 2 miles down in the ocean.
I think a lot of us would be unsettled, so you're right. All right, we'll go back to Ms. Overstreet's class. If you guys know now.
Did you come up with a question? No, we didn't come up with a question.
That's okay. If you think of one, we can come back to you in a little bit, okay? Perfect. Okay, well, we'll go back to Oxnard for the Martinez's class. Hey again.
So my question is about the chimera, long-nosed chimera. Does it hurt people at all, or attack, or defend itself?
So again, a great question. You clearly have a lot of questions. But no, they are actually not that big. I mean, from the picture, it looks like it's pretty big, right? But it's probably only about this big in reality. And on top of it, there are no humans down there, and they don't come into shallow waters like normal sharks do. So there's no opportunity for it to hurt humans. But anyway, even if there were, I don't really think it has very big teeth. And it has things which it likes to eat, you know, but there are other animals down there. I don't think there's ever been an example of a submersible being attacked by a purely deep sea creature, but there have been instances where submersibles have been visited by sperm whales, there's a really famous story where a marlin, so those are the ones with the really long, like a swordfish kind of, with the really long sword type nose. It actually ran into one of the submersibles called Alvin, and the pilots couldn't see what was wrong. They just felt this huge bang and felt the submersible shudder. And they could just see something out of the corner of the window, but they couldn't really see what was there. And it wasn't until they came up that there was this like 8-foot-long swordfish stuck by its nose in the side of the submersible. So I think they all ate it actually later that night. But yeah, so there's never been an animal in the deep sea that's attacked humans specifically, but I think it's more that some of the fish like swordfish or some of the deep water sharks or even deep sea squid, the big ones, can feel threatened and they'll attack the actual ROV or the submersible. But we're usually pretty safe inside if we are down there.
I want to take the opportunity with a question about a shark relative being dangerous, because we always love to get this in Ocean Hangouts. So can you tell us a little bit about sharks being dangerous in general?
So they are actually not very dangerous. So this is sort of a myth that is perpetuated by, you know, movies and the media and so on. But in reality, sharks don't really attack people that often. It's just every time one does, it seems to make the news all over the world. So it seems to appear more common than it is. But your chances of being attacked by a shark are actually much similar. Like, I think it's your chances of being, what is it? Like killed by a falling coconut are much higher.
Yeah, coconuts like 20 a year. Sharks are like 4. People crushed by vending machines, I think, are 10. And selfies were like 15. So you're way more likely to die taking a selfie than you are to be killed by a shark.
Much less things like, you know, going in cars, which are way more dangerous than sharks. So don't be afraid of sharks, really. They're fantastic and they're really, really important to our oceans.
Thank you, Diva. All right, let's go to Miss Rowan's class again.
Hello.
Hi.
The first jellyfish related animal that you liked, how big is it? Is it a small related jellyfish or is it like huge?
So that particular species is probably about that big. The bell. So the actual bell that's red and yellow is about that big. And then the tentacles will probably be a little bit longer, obviously, maybe about that big. So that one actually, what happens a lot with deep sea stuff, because you're looking through the, like using cameras to look at the animals, they just appear to be bigger. And this is something that I found I really struggled with when I first started doing deep sea science. You know, you see these shrimp or you see this jellyfish and you think, whoa, that's huge. The octopus, the white octopus I showed you guys, you know, you think it would be about that big. But when you actually go to collect it and can see it compared to the scale of something, they're actually normally much, much tinier. So it's something with the tricks of the camera making things appear bigger than they really are. But a lot of stuff in the deep sea is quite small.
Excellent. Let's go to this.
Okay. All right. Have you ever seen or researched a blobfish?
Have I ever seen a blobfish?
Yes.
No. So I have like a bucket list of deep sea things I want to see throughout my career. And I've ticked off most of them, but a blobfish is actually one that I have not yet ticked. So that is a great question. It's still left unticked. I'm hoping I will. If I ever see one, I'll let you know.
Quick follow-up for the classes that might not know. Could you describe a blobfish a little, and what else is on your list?
So the blobfish is actually, when they come out of water, they sort of collapse onto themselves because there's nothing to support their body, right? So when they're in the water. And so when they come out of the water, they just sort of collapse and become this literal pink blob that have this really sad looking face. Like after, if you have a chance, Google blobfish, you'll find it. Okay. But actually when they're in the sea, they don't look like that at all. They look completely different because again, the water is there to support their whole structure. So what else is on my list? Oh, that's a great question. Actually, so a brine lake. So if you guys saw like the Blue Planet episode, Blue Planet 2 episode, it's this lake of super salty water, which is at the bottom of the ocean. So you literally have a lake at the bottom of the ocean, and they usually have like the seashore around it of like mussels or something. So it really does look like a lake surrounded by pebbles. And so that was on my list, but I actually saw it in December during the Gulf of Mexico cruise. So that was, I mean, I was like screaming when we found it. So apart from that, probably some type like a giant squid. That would be amazing. I've never seen a giant squid or a colossal squid. And so that would be pretty epic.
Okay. I like picturing the other scientists in the submersible.
No, we weren't in a submersible. Luckily, we were in the control van on the ship using an ROV. But yeah.
All right. Well, we'll check Miss Overstreet's class one more time. Do you guys have any questions or not? No?
Come on. You must have one question.
Sinking ships?
Oh, he wants to know about a sinking ship.
So we do actually find shipwrecks quite often There are a lot of them down in the deep ocean, a lot more than we would think. So on the two expeditions I've been on the Oceanus Explorer, which stream all of their deep sea dives live, and from next week, they're actually going to be streaming all of the exploration off Florida, Georgia, and so on, going up the East Coast live every day. So you should definitely check that out if you can. But on both of those expeditions, we found shipwrecks. And the one in December was a shipwreck that's probably from the 1800s. And all the wood, because back in the day, it was mostly wooden ships, right? And so all of the wood was eaten away by animals because it's this source of food. But then the metal that they had coating the wood was still there. And so you could see this sort of skeleton of the ship with as well, like the numbers that showed how low the ship was sitting in the water when it would have been used. And in it, we found like champagne flutes, lots of bottles, lots of pottery, amphoras that would have been used to carry like oil or something. And so we think the ship that we found actually transported material from maybe like New Orleans area to the Caribbean and South America back in the 18th century. And then when we were in 2016, we were exploring the Marianas Trench. And there, because of World War II, there are a lot of wrecks, not just of ships, but also of planes. And so we actually explored the wreck of a B-29 fighter plane. And so that was really, really amazing. It was the first time I'd ever seen a plane wreck, not a shipwreck.
Cool. All right, Diva, do you have time for 3 more quick questions?
Yes.
Great. Let's go back to Oxnard. Both classes. Is it going to be the same student? Different student? Entirely up to you guys.
Anybody?
Anyone have a question, Miss Martinez, Miss Barajas? No? That's okay. That's okay. We can.
Nobody has one?
I'll head to Ms. Rowan's class then to finish us off.
Oh, I think there's someone coming up from the other class we were just on.
We'll come back to you in 2 seconds.
Sorry.
Is there someone? Yes?
Yeah, look.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's a set.
3 for 3.
You've gotten 3 questions, and I feel like you're the star of this show.
Okay, my question is.
Yeah. Oh, let me just get the mic going. Yep, you're good to go.
All right, my question is, what does a long-nosed chimera eat?
That is a great question. So, why do you think it's got this long nose? It's because it uses the nose, like lots of sharks do, to sort of detect electrical impulses and vibrations in the water. And so it uses that long nose to look for its prey. And so we think they eat lots of tiny little crustaceans, things like little crabs or amphipods, which are kind of like insects in the deep sea. And so we think it snuffles along on the deep sea floor and looks for animals and then just munches them up using its big long nose.
Very cool. All right, and we'll wrap up with the last question by Miss Rowan's class. Go for it. You're good? Yep, you're good.
Is there any like descendants of like whales? So like before there was blue whales and like a couple billion years ago, were whales actually like form on the bottom and like kind of like rise up like ancient whales kind of just evolutionary going up?
So that's a great question. We don't get any live whales in the deep sea, or I mean, even back in the day, in prehistoric times, there wouldn't have been live whales in the deep sea because, of course, actually, no, I take that back. I am completely wrong. Let me start to answer your question again, because it's a really good one, and I should have thought of this before. So we do get whales, both prehistoric types back in the day and modern whales now, that can dive really deep, mostly beaked whales nowadays. So things like sperm whales or other types of beaked whales. And while, of course, there are no prehistoric whales alive now, something interesting that we have recently found and actually isn't out in the news yet, so you're kind of one of the first people to know, is that in the Pacific, we've come across a sort of a graveyard of whale bones. And so these aren't from whales nowadays. These are from prehistoric whales. And so they've got these really long sort of snouts. And so we're finding lots and lots of skulls of these whales all over the seafloor in this one particular area between California and Hawaii. And so that's a really interesting discovery that we made a couple years ago, and we are hoping to do that. It'll be out in the news later this year. So keep your eyes out for that. But that's a great question.
That's awesome. All right, Diva, at the end of every hangout, what we do is we're going to demute every class's microphone. So of all the classes, Miss Barajas' class, Miss Overstreet's class, and Miss Rowan's class, if you guys could join me in saying a big thank you and goodbye to Diva for joining us today. So thank you, Diva. Awesome. And for all the classes too, again, we're halfway through our Oceans Week, so please do join us for the rest of the week. Diva, that was outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
All right, and you're welcome back anytime.